Hello and welcome. My name is Dr. Walter Ling. I am the founding director of this organization, ISEP. And basically I'm the old man of this place. I'm talking to you this morning or today about addiction being a brain disease. Now, when Alan Lessner first brought the idea that addiction is a brain disease, he also mentioned that it matters. What matters is that understanding addiction as a brain disease gives us a chance to substitute science for the ideology that has been driving this field. And within the brain and the science that goes with it is where we come to understand addiction as brain disease and also find solutions, find ways to overcome the addiction. As usual, we disclose what we do, and this is a small field. So all of us work with many companies that are small companies who are trying to develop treatments for this field. Now, we are going to go through a number of topics in this half an hour or so. However, the main theme of this talk is that what matters in the idea of addiction being a brain disease. Along with that statement, Alan Lessner had also posed a question, which is why do people take drugs? And so the first thing is try to understand the relationship between the drugs and the brain. And then once we get some understanding of it, we're trying to address the issue of, so what does that mean? And what can we do about it? Or use knowledge to do what we are involved with. This is dealing with the problem of addiction. So let's begin by introducing ourselves to our brain. We actually have three brains. The so-called the triune brain, in other words, 3 in 1. We started with having our brain when we were still lizards and crocodiles. That's our reptilian brain. The reptilian brain does 4 things. It's involved with feeding, fighting, flighting, and fleeing and reproducing. So, feeding, fighting, fleeing, and reproducing. All of that are involved in our survival. So that's basically what the reptilian brain is for. It helps us survive as individuals and as a species. Many million years later, we developed the second brain, what we call the limbic brain, which is where our memory and our emotion reside. That allows us to love, make attachments, connect with other people, and is the foundation of our community and civilization. So both the reptilian brain, which helps us survive, and the emotional brain that help us connect are brains that needs to be put under control of some kind. So we develop a cortical brain, which is the CEO of our brain. And the cortical brain came pretty late. Probably within, in terms of the time scale of the universe, it's a very late comer. And the thing to remember is that is the brain that gives us intelligence, help us with thinking, help us with the develop insight to things, make choices, and therefore develop a sense of ourselves, sense of morality, and finally help us try to figure out what life is all about. which is to seek meaning in life. Now, the thing to remember about this last brain is that it is basically still under construction. We aren't sure where it's going yet. We have managed to produce, through this brain, all kinds of material comfort for our lives. At the same time, we also managed to produce something that could wipe us out completely in an instant. So we need to keep those things in mind. Connected with the understanding of the brain is, why do people take drugs? Well, Alan Lasser also pronounced in the same statement that people basically take drugs because they like what drugs do to their brain, which is make them feel good. And if they are not feeling good, to make them feel better, but basically to feel good. Now, how does that work? Well, there's this idea that addiction and love are actually chemical cousins. They're closely related, and because both of them involve a chemical in the brain called dopamine. Dopamine is the chemical in our brain that produces a sense of well-being, euphoria, and make us want to repeat the experience. But it's also involved in learning, a special kind of learning, what we call conditioned learning. In other words, they're learning through experience and incorporating the experience into the memory so that the next time learning change, it becomes more compelling to us. It also causes release of another chemical called oxytocin. Now, oxytocin is what we call a love chemical or a cuddling chemical. It makes us want to stick around with whoever we have this relationship with. It also releases norepinephrine, which is our excitement chemical in the brain, which is what makes your heart rate goes up and your pupil dilate and make your palms sweaty when you first fall in love. Now, you see from the bottom panels that all drugs does the same thing. Whether it's cocaine, whether it's cigarette smoking, nicotine from cigarettes, morphine, or amphetamine, they all give the brain a big charge of the release of dopamine. The thing to notice, though, is that if you look at these scales, feeling good with food probably goes up a scale of a couple of hundred, and cocaine up to about 300-400, nicotine couple hundred, morphine maybe 250. Look at amphetamine, it goes up to thousands. And that's the reason why amphetamines are so much more powerful and more destructive. Now, we just mentioned that dopamine does several things. One is that it produces euphoria and a desire to repeat the experience. It's also involved in what is called reward-driven memory, which is the kind of memory that we give us meaning to the memory itself. And I'll come to that in a moment. It also releases oxytocin, the cutting hormone, as we say. Now let us focus on the conditioned response or the reward-driven learning for a moment. We all remember the Pavlov's dog story. Pavlov, the physiologist in Russia in the last century, he couples feeding his dog with a ring or a bell. Pretty soon the two became associated, and so the dogs start to salivate as if they're going to be fed whenever he rang the bell. Now, what it means is the dogs now incorporate the experience of the feeding into the ringing of the bell. Now, we do the same thing. When you first go out to have dinner with your good friend, whether your boyfriend or your girlfriend, you remember that when you sit down to dinner at the restaurant, it's not just a piece of fish or steak. It's the entire environment, the ambience. The waiter comes over with a towel draped over his arm, the candlelight, the wine. So pretty soon, going out to dinner incorporates those things into the experience and make you want to go out. So the first time you go out, it might be because of the meal, but the second time you go out, it's because of the memory. You now remember. So each time the experience adds to the value of the memory. And that is what we mean by salience. So the salience makes we want to do more and more and more, and eventually doing more and more takes over our whole lives. And if that doing more and more is doing drugs, then by definition, we have become addicted. The Japanese had a kind of a cute way to put it together. In a short proverb, it says, first, the man takes a drink. Then the drink takes a drink. And then the drink takes a man. Now, to sum up this idea about addiction, there are a few basic things that is worth remembering. So becoming addicted is not the same as staying addicted. Remember, becoming addicted is a matter of drug effect. But staying addicted is a matter of memory. Remember it. Therefore, getting off drugs is not the same as staying off drugs. The real problem with addiction is not getting off drugs. It's basically staying off drugs. And staying off drugs, which is what we mean by relapse prevention, requires replacing the old memory of drug use with a non-drug memory. And so the addicted brain, in a sense, it did not gain a disease. It has actually lost the memory of the old non-drug life. So to overcome addiction, you need to get a new life. Get a life that doesn't involve the memory of the drugs. Since relapse prevention is so central to drug addiction and overcoming drug addiction, let's take a closer look at what relapse is and what relapse prevention is all about. Relapse is a matter of memory. If you don't have memory, you don't relapse. People have had a stroke and stopped drinking because they don't remember what it's like to drink. In fact, people have been shot in the head. You can do it if you get shot in the head in the right place. You could forget about the memory of drugs and you wouldn't do drugs anymore. So people had stopped smoking, just got shot in the head. Now, that's not something you want to go back to the office and do, but that's, as far as the brain is concerned, those are scientific facts. The way things work is that anytime we have a behavior, we create an experience, and the experience creates memory. The memory then creates a belief system that forms the basis that determines our behavior. So if we change the memory, we can change our brain. And if we change our brain, we'll change our lives. As a matter of fact, the only way that life will turn out differently is we do things different. Relapse is basically a three-character act, or a three-act play, if you want to put it that way. First, as I mentioned, you need to have that memory. You remember that old song that Huey Blake had called Memories of You. It says everything seems to bring memories of you. So all the things around you, both inside your own head and your own memory and externally, all remind you of the drug experience. And that's the basic basis of relapse, because the drug memory. Now, things have to remind you, and those are the cues and triggers. And now this could be anything. It could be running into an old friend, finding some old paraphernalia in a drawer, anything that reminds you. These are the triggers. And then in between, there's got to be an internal dialogue, a conversation with yourself, to speak. You got to talk yourself into doing it. People talk themselves into things, and they talk themselves out of things. And relapse is basically a process that doesn't happen by accident. You have to have this memory and a trigger, and then you got to talk yourself into it. So it's a three-part process. Now, to deal with relapse, to prevent a relapse, basically you have to forget it. Like it's forgetting that process. So relapse prevention means forgetting or getting rid of the old drug memories, because they are the basis of relapse. Now, there are ways to forget. They both involve modern science and also ancient art. People have been trying to forget for thousands of years. There are basically two ways to forget. You can forget by suppressing the old memory, which is to block out the old memory. And this involves a part of the brain that had to do with memory itself. It turns out that when you recall memory, we basically reconstruct the memory from pieces of the old memory. It's not like playing back a videotape. We actually remake the memory new each time. It's more like recreating a play rather than replaying a videotape. The other way to forget about old memory is to substitute it with another memory. In other words, recording over the old memory. Now, people have been trying to help with medications to help us forget. And there are a number of medications that are being tried. So far, in this area, in the area of drug abuse, we haven't had much success. There have been some early success in the area of post-traumatic stress disorders, some obsessive compulsive disorders, severe anxiety, but in the area of drug abuse treatment, it has not made much headway yet. In the coming years, we'll probably learn more about how to do it, how to use medication to help this process of forgetting. What we have to do for the time being is to learn to create non-drug memories, the good old-fashioned way. Now, how do you create memory in the old-fashioned way? Well, remember that memory comes from life experience. So you have to do things that are new, that are different. Remember when you have a bad love experience. Basically, the best way to forget about an old girlfriend is to have a new girlfriend. The same thing, the way to forget our old boyfriend is to have a new boyfriend. So that is substitution. You write the new memory over the old. Because experience leads to protein synthesis in the brain, which creates new brain connections, which is the basis of the new memory. And so any non-drug memory makes new non-drug connections in the brain, and you create a new set of memory. Basically, the way to change our life then is to do things differently, so that they will turn out differently based on a different set of memory that we create. Now, there are a number of things that could help this process to create non-drug memories. A good physical health, sound mental health, stay off drugs and keep busy, take personal responsibilities, live in harmony with families and friends, be a good member of the community, and develop a new sense of ourselves, which is to say, find meanings in life. If you look at the experience of people trying to overcome drugs or overcome addiction, the things that really can predict long-term success are some of these things. Having a sustained abstinence for a few years, 5 years, good. Being employed, taking personal responsibility, take care of business, be connected to family, friends, and be a good member of the community by contributing to the community. Then a new sense of self, a new worldview about what life is all about. Now, let's return to the question we asked earlier. Why do people take drugs? We know that it's taking drugs and the interaction of the drugs with the brain that led to addiction. So what is it? Why do people do that? And we have mentioned that people take drugs, basically they want to feel good. As it turned out, feeling good comes in two flavors. There are two kinds of feeling good. One is having a good time, or what we call hedonia. In other words, just feeling good. The other is feeling good about being the person you are, or what is called eudaimonia, being yourself, feeling good about. So feeling good, having a good time is not the same as feeling good about yourself, being the person you are. Hedonia is having pleasure, having a good time. Eudaimonia means pleasure with a sense of meaning or sense of meaningfulness. So feeling good yourself as opposed to feeling good about yourself. Now, you know, eudaimonia always includes hedonia. It's part of it. But the reverse is not true. You can have a good time, but you wouldn't feel good about yourself. So what are the elements that go into this idea of feeling good and feeling good about yourself? Well, in other words, it's actualizing our potential as a human being. Feeling like being useful, meaningful to be the person that we are. Living as one who's inherently intended to live. In other words, there is a meaning. We are supposed to live this way. Or living with a purpose, which is to say, who am I? Why am I here? What am I here for? So we now know that this kind of feeling good is associated with better endocrinological regulation of our brain. You know, our brain gets healthier. There's better cardiovascular risk. In other words, everything, including better immune functioning. In other words, eudaimonia makes us healthier. On the other hand, hedonia itself, as you know, our body responds to having a good time, like it's undergoing stress. Our heart rate goes up, our stress hormone goes up, so we get ourselves sick. We become unhealthy with having a good time. Whereas feeling good about yourself, having a happiness that way, make us healthier. The Western science and Eastern philosophy, up to about 2,500 years, is coming together. The newest science we realize is called contemplative neuroscience, which is how to understand the brain by approaching it through understanding the mind. So the meditation, the looking into ourselves, and the two methods have now converged into a new worldview. Now, what is it that they have found about our reality? It's like the reality as we know it is a product of our mind. It's actually an illusion. Our reality is a creation of mind. Intrinsic reality itself is emptiness, as Buddha put it. Modern science says the universe is a hologram. And in fact, we gave a guy a Nobel Prize for it, who told us that. Nothing can last and nothing can be possessed. We all say that. We just don't live like we believe it. We say nothing lasts forever, you can take anything with you, but we don't really act like we believe. Now we found that doing good for someone, which is a eudaimonic happiness, is better than having a good time yourself. In other words, doing good is better than feeling good. So we need to adopt a new life that centers on others instead of ourselves. So to sum up, addiction is a brain disease. Then what does it mean? Our brain is unique in that it's the only organ that we have, which has a spiritual meaning, an allegorical representation. In other words, a spiritual representation. It's mysterious, it's actually supernatural, and it's moral. It is really the great unknown to us. It is our organ of expression and relationships. And so the disease of the brain is not just a disease of our self. It's a disease of our sense of self. In other words, it's not a disease of the self, but it's a disease of the selfhood. And it affects not just our body, but our relationship. It affects our personhood, and it affects our relationship with ourselves, our family, society, and with God, however you define it. So, in the end, the question is this: who am I and what I'm doing here? And that exploration of the brain and the mind that connects with it. Unfortunately, only you or I individually can decide that. Whether we are here at random with just a collections of DNAs and genes, or we are a unique person created with a purpose, however we decide has a profound effect on us, on the way we deal with ourselves, and the way we think of ourselves, and the way we deal with others, and that includes our patients. So, to conclude, understanding addiction as a brain disease should not just give us new knowledge. It shouldn't just inform us. It should transform us. In other words, it should not inform us, but change us. And how that will change us has a great deal to do with how we deal with ourselves from this point on, and how we deal with our patients. And with that, I thank you. And there are a lot more information that the group has, and you can go to our website and look up more information. Thank you.